The JLR Interview Series.
Hi, this is Andrea Vicari. You're listening to Jazz Doodles on jazzlondonradio.com. Today's show features pianist composer Gwilym Simcock. If you haven't heard of Gwilym before, I'm sure you've heard of Pat Metheny, and it's in this band that he's been the regular pianist for some time now. Originally from Cheshire in the UK, Gwilym attended Chetham's School of Music in Manchester and then went on to do various musical projects. This includes working with Bill Bruford's Earthworks, working with Tim Garland, writing for the London Sinfonia, playing with Pat Metheny's band, and playing with the Impossible Gentleman. More of that to come later in the show. And so here's my interview with pianist-composer Gwilym Simcock. So my guest today is Gwilym Simcock.
Keep that in.
So my guest today is Gwilym Simcock. Welcome to Jazz London Radio, Gwilym.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be with you. Nice to see you again, actually, after a very long time.
It's been a while, but there we go. That's what happens with life. I just wanted to talk about the thing that's kind of been on my mind for a while. It's your latest gig that you were doing pre-COVID, obviously, lockdown, which was touring with Pat Metheny. And I would say you've got the ultimate gig, touring with one of the most famous jazz musicians in the world. So, do tell, I mean, I think your presence in the band is fantastic. And I actually think that you are, I think it's brilliant. A UK musician playing with someone like Pat Metheny, you obviously deserve it. You're, of the same quality. It's fantastic. But how did you get to be part of this group?
Oh, it's really, really kind of you. Thank you. It's funny, really, because actually when I started, I trained originally as a classical musician at school and sort of got into jazz when I was about 13 or 14. There was some improvising classes at classical music school run by a great guy called Steve Berry, who I'm sure you know from the world of jazz, who's now sort of, very much a northerner, really, lives up in Blackburn, and he teaches at Chetham's Music School.
I know Steve very well, yeah.
He's just the most incredible educator, lovely, positive force, but a really great educator. And he was a very large part, really, for me, in sort of changing musical direction in my life, because he was so enthusiastic about jazz, and he took improvisation classes for the classical musicians. So I remember just sort of initially going along to those groups, and he'd sort of sit us all around in a circle, everyone with their instruments, and he basically was he'd build up chords and then get people to try and improvise over the top. And for some reason, that was a very sort of straightforward thing. For me, it just seemed to be something which seemed to be there somehow. I mean, I'm very, very fortunate to have perfect pitch, which of course is incredibly useful when it comes to improvising and analyzing what's coming in as you're listening to the other musicians and then reacting to that. But he sort of obviously, hopefully, saw something that was that might be a possibility for me to get into that world, and he made me a cassette of a lot of different jazz musicians, which the first ones really were kind of responsible for changing my life, really. And there was the beautiful Keith Jarrett track Questar off an album called My Song. A brilliant Egberto Gismonti track called Loro, which again is just that's a beautiful piece of music, and then two Pat Metheny tracks off an album called Travels. So those four things were really, really special pieces of music for me. There was loads of other stuff on there as well. I think there was some Miles Davis, some Charlie Parker and things, but they at that point I couldn't quite see the connection with classical music in the same way as I could with those four pieces of music that I mentioned, that I think all on ECM and on all having that kind of ECM sound world of a very luxurious, almost classical like sound to the recording itself, which again, hearing the piano in an ECM setting, if you hear Jarrett playing the piano on ECM or the Egberto Gismonti, you can imagine it being a Beethoven sonata or some Rachmaninoff, and hearing the recording of that. And so I think, as a young kid, there was an obvious connection there to open the sort of door into this world. So I'm very grateful to Steve, obviously, again, being a wonderful educator, he would have guessed that. I presume that those tracks would be more of an obvious doorway into this world than something that was maybe slightly different. So that was the beginning, really, of me getting into jazz. So then, sort of fast forward to the present day, having the opportunity to play with Pat is absolutely, obviously, a huge privilege.
I mean, how did you get asked to play that? I mean, you didn't just get like an email or like chat with him. Is there a connection? Was there people you're playing with that maybe that
Well,
knew him?
funny enough, it all started with me actually just getting an email one morning. And obviously I can remember it vividly. I was just, I mean, this must have been more like 10 years ago, something like that. And I just got an email. I just got up. I was just sitting there in a cuppa in my pajamas and got an email from Pat Metheny. And I couldn't quite believe it for a second.
As you do.
Yeah, no, but he was doing an interview with somebody, and it might have been Claire Martin. I'm not sure, but somebody. And it was around the time that, or a couple of years after I'd done, the first time I did an album was maybe about 2007, 2008. And I think in the liner notes for that album, I'd mentioned that I was a big fan of Metheny. And I think we've been great mates for a long time. And I'm pretty sure it was her, and then given him a copy of my album when she was later interviewing Pat. So I think that was how the connection started really. So yeah, I got this email down the line from him just saying, oh, he'd been enjoying my music, and we should keep in touch. Because obviously I was dancing around my living room in my pajamas, very excited. That was great. And we sort of did occasionally exchange a few emails, and then a couple of years later than that, he got in touch again and said, "Oh, I'm just coming to London to do a concert with the band he had then, which was after the Metheny group, but the one with Chris Potter." And he said, "Oh, would you like a ticket to come and watch it?" So of course, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to do that. I'm not very forward in those kind of situations, but I thought, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I said, "Oh yeah, love a ticket. Is there any chance at all we could have a quick play while you're over?" Sort of not really thinking that would be a serious possibility. And subsequently, having been on tour with him and knowing how tight the schedule is and how absolutely packed it is, even more surprised really looking back. But he very kindly made the space. I think the next day he had a travel day before going to another concert in Holland, so he changed his flights and stayed in London for an extra day. And well, obviously, I was dead excited, and I wanted it to be a nice experience. So I booked, and you'll remember this place, but sadly no longer a venue, but the Forge, which was a fantastic little concert hall in Camden, which I'm gutted that place doesn't exist anymore, because that was a really, really lovely place to make music. A very small, little, intimate concert hall. Many of the listeners will probably remember it, attached to a nice restaurant. And so I just booked that out for a couple of hours and picked him up the next morning after his gig. We went and just had a play for a couple of hours, which of course was like incredibly nerve-wracking, but amazing.
I'm getting stressed just hearing about it now. I'm trying to imagine, like, I mean, obviously, it was a good gamble, but yeah, just that when someone's your hero and you think, I know I should like make that effort, whatever it is, and then you do it, and then you're like, oh my God, and then after the event you're like, oh, it's difficult to explain, isn't it? It's kind of, you have to put yourself in that situation to get your career going, but it's so hard, isn't it? It's so nerve-wracking, yeah.
Oh God, absolutely. I mean, and to be honest, I definitely might end up coming to this in another context later on, but I mean, I really do struggle with the performance sort of anxiety side of it, and that's always been a big thing for me to get through, which probably almost certainly comes from going to a very competitive music school when I was a kid, and the idea of you play 3 wrong notes, that's a bad performance, is sort of unfortunately always stuck with me, even in this genre where of course you're making a lot of things up. So putting yourself in stressful kind of performance situations, as that, I mean, that wasn't a performance, but it was obviously something where I wanted to make a good impression, is my absolute kind of least favorite type of situation to be in. So it was a real sort of situation of sort of biting the bullet and going for it. But like you say, sometimes you just have to do that, don't you?
So you've told us that you were asked to play. Well, where we left it was you were jamming with Pat Metheny as you do, and then we talked about how it was nerve-wracking. And I just wondered, how did you go from there to being part of the band? Did he just ring you up and say, "Hey, I've got this tour. Do you want to join us?" Or
yeah, I mean, we had that little play that day, which was obviously very, a special experience for me, and it was still enjoyable because really my sort of musical DNA, such a strong part of that is his music. I mean, sort of, especially straight eighth sort of music that with soaring melodies and that kind of harmony is completely inbuilt to what because of that starting point really, is inbuilt to what jazz strongly is for me. So in a way, I'm not saying that I wasn't nervous at all. I was incredibly nervous, but hopefully when you're nervous, you're kind of drawing on those resources which are very sort of, not the last resort. I can't think how to describe it really, but you're down to the bare bones of what all you can do is actually what's sort of really inside you. And fortunately for me, because of him and that music, sort of playing his music is the last resort for me, if that makes any kind of vague sense at all. So I somehow got through the nerves of it by just playing, and fortunately what came out hopefully was reasonably okay.
I mean, if people hadn't heard your stuff, I mean, obviously if they listen now, they will hear your music. But if I was to sort of describe your piano playing, I'd say it's a very lyrical style of playing. And yes, you can tell you've had classical training in that you've got a very good touch on the piano. Although I think now most people have got like a fairly good touch on the piano, but I think it's just, I mean, there is chromaticism and everything, but I do think that there's a lot of beauty in your playing, and there's different styles, aren't there? I mean, if you think about people in the past, certain people are more percussive, certain people are more bebop, blah blah blah. But I think that's the way I hear your music. And when you talk about Pat Metheny, that side, there is that beauty in his soloing as well. To the extent that sometimes I've heard people sort of almost, that thing when they sort of go, oh no, that's just too, there's not enough chromaticism or something, which would be silly obviously to say that because he does play chromatically, but that beauty in his music almost I just feel that's the connection that you two have in playing together.
Oh, again, that's really kind of it. I mean, definitely, certainly as I get older, what I would try and aspire to with creating music is something which has an emotional point to it. I mean, I think that as we all get older, it's unavoidable. Really, what's the point of music? And it's not to be clever. Really, that's sort of unsustainable as a kind of as an end game for everything. If we decide what music we want to listen to, we're not. I mean, there might be a little bit of something that's interesting because it's technically difficult in whatever respect. But really, if we say, "Oh, what's your favourite thing?" it's probably going to be because it makes you feel happy and it makes you enjoy listening to it, which is an emotional experience. And what really interests me now in creating music is how we can use the technical skills that we have within this world to turning those technical skills into something which evokes an emotional response from the listener. And I find that a really interesting process. And obviously, it's one that kind of takes your whole life, really. Like music, notes, chords, harmony, rhythm, melody, to using that, manipulating that in a way to turning this voicing of this chord or this resolution into something which makes you feel sad or makes you feel happy. I mean, obviously, a major chord sort of somehow signifies happiness, and a minor chord sadness. But that when did that get decided, and how does that work? You can't really draw an equation to why that is. It's a completely nebulous concept, isn't it? Why is a minor third? Why is that sad? There's no particular mathematical equation that equates to sadness, is there? So those sort of obviously that's the very boring kind of headline type element of that, but sort of investigating different things within the creation of musical notes and harmony, as I say, harmony, melody and rhythm, using that to try and remove, it sounds a bit pretentious, sorry, I don't mean it to, but try and remove a listener from your space. The greatest thing when you're listening to a piece of music is to kind of, it ends 10 minutes later and you've forgotten what the time was because you were so engrossed in the journey, the arc of the music. And certainly when I'm talking to, I do a bit of teaching at the Royal Academy in London, and what I really enjoy trying to get them to think about is this element of what you're trying to achieve with music, because of course you've got to learn all the rudiments and all the, the technical rudiments and the, whatever else. But what's the point of it? What are we trying to achieve? And certainly for me, the decision to listen to music, I don't find it. I don't know how you find it, but I don't find it easy sometimes to listen to music recreationally, because it is too much of a sort of your classic busman's holiday, really, because you're thinking about it all the time. You're kind of analysing it. You're wondering what's going on. So for me to really want to listen to a piece of music, it's got to be because I'm going to get an emotional payoff from that.
If I start going off at a tangent like that, I'll never shut up, and I don't want to interview myself. But yes, what you're saying rings very true with me, and I have a lot of I have a lot of ideas on all of that. But essentially, for me, music is like food. It's like another sense. So the pleasure I get from hearing music, and sometimes not always playing music, is a sense that I can't explain to someone. And I absolutely cannot understand anyone who goes, "I never listen to music." It's like, it's like saying I don't eat or something. It's really weird. But that's we're lucky. We've got that extra sense. So anyway, on that note, I was going to talk a little bit about other bands that you've been involved in, because for a number of years, there's a supergroup, an Anglo-American supergroup, the Impossible Gentlemen, with British guitar legend Mike Walker, and then Americans, bass player Steve Rodby and Adam Nussbaum, and then obviously in the first couple of albums, you had Steve Swallow as well, and then it was a part of the album, the middle album, that I think it's internationally recognised Aliens. Steve Swallow featured on that, and we can talk a little bit about that. I was just thinking maybe it might be good to hear that band, and I was interested in playing Laugh Lines, which is the first track on the first album from 2011, and I just found it quite an attractive tune. I kind of put a Hermeto Pasquale type tune, quite an elaborate tune, and I think it's doubled or something, and another instrument. Anyway, so let's have a listen to that. So that was Laugh Lines, and that was from the 2011 Impossible Gentleman CD with the same name, the Impossible Gentleman band and the CD. So that band, I mean, I'm just imagining, I haven't actually bothered to look into it, because I'm just imagining that your relationship with Mike Walker and then obviously Ian Dixon might have been because you were based in the north of England, and maybe the Cheethams connection. Is that part of the reason that you formed that band with Mike?
It's a red herring. No, actually, me and Mike met because we were both sort of, I think, pretty much subbing, really, as the Americans say. No, we were both. Do they say something? We say depping. I can't.
Depping.
It's so long since I've done a gig, I can't remember what any of the terms are even.
Called depping.
Depping. That's right. Sorry, that's very embarrassing.
Hang on. Subbing is football or sport or hockey or whatever.
Right. See, that's my extra confusion because I'm a massive football fan. So that's I've definitely been involved with more football than music in the last year.
I'm a hockey player. I'm still playing hockey. So I constantly get them confused. Obviously not. We got our first training session tomorrow after about a 4-month break. But yeah, so it's depping. Right. I'm glad we got that cleared up. Yeah, so you were depping for who?
I can't even remember, but Tim had a wonderful band called the Dean Street Underground Orchestra.
I remember that band. Yes, they made some nice recordings and some education packs or something, I think, or published.
Yeah, I mean, Tim.
Papers, yeah.
Yeah, Tim's been an amazing sort of important figure in my life, really. Sort of the closest thing I've had really to sort of musical brother, really, and he's sort of been as close as family for me for many years. And I met him as a student at the academy, and he sort of eventually got me into lots of different musical situations, which I'm incredibly grateful for. But one of them was early on was sort of depping in that I think it was probably Gareth Williams' gig, possibly. I can't even remember now, but just playing a couple of gigs with that band, which was a lovely, was it 9 or 10 piece band, a couple of horns, and Tim's such a phenomenal composer and arranger, and all the charts were fantastic. And but anyway, there were a couple of gigs on the road, and I think we went up to Leeds possibly, or somewhere definitely up that way. And Mike was also depping in the band, and that's where we first met, actually, just on one of those gigs of Tim's, and we just sort of ended up hitting it off. And it was sort of Mike's idea, really, because he'd also played with Steve Swallow and Adam Nussbaum and different other kind of connotations, and he sort of put it together, really. And it's interesting, that first album, I mean, that track Laugh Lines, that's definitely, it's definitely a very full-on one in terms of what the content of the band was. I remember that first album was an interesting challenge, because me and Mike just said, we'll just bring some songs, write some songs and bring them along. And I think that really was easier for Mike, because he had an idea of what the band was, with it being his idea. For me, I obviously knew the playing and music very well of Steve Swallow and Adam's drumming, of course, but so to trying to create music when you're not quite sure what it's for is a really interesting challenge, actually. So I definitely, looking back, as with a lot of things I look back at, is I wish I'd sort of, with hindsight, I wish I'd done them better. But Mike's tunes on that album are absolutely beautiful. There's another one called When You Hold Her as well, which is absolutely gorgeous. And then as over the 3 albums that we've done, I think we kind of got definitely more into the compositional side, and certainly making composing the music together, right up to certainly that represented most almost in the last album called Let's Get Deluxe, where we layered up a lot of different sounds and a lot of different instruments. And I think that's something that we both really enjoyed. And again, there's probably definitely a subconscious sort of influence of the Metheny thing in there. Of course, so many of his albums beautifully layered up and structured, and that big kind of orchestral sound, whether it's a real orchestra or a synthesized orchestra or combination of both. For me, I love that sound. That interests me sort of way more than, say, the sound of a jazz piano trio, which I love, but it doesn't really have the same emotional power. Going back to the emotions, for me, that biggest sound world is something which moves me more. And definitely that was an enjoyable element of the last album we did, Let's Get Deluxe, where we sort of explored that kind of sound world thing a little bit more.
The thing with orchestral writing and it was the ultimate, wasn't it? If you recorded with strings in the old days, you'd made it, Parker with strings or whatever it was. And I always find that quite, it seems to be the natural thing. It's like, oh, let's do something with strings or an orchestra or a bigger ensemble. So it does seem like a sort of natural thing. I'm a bit of a purist. I always think, I listen to albums with strings and I'm very critical when they just write the strings in unison, and I'm like,
yeah, something
that's not really, but I did a music degree with proper kind of like, you'd have to write orchestral scores, and that's another story, but you'd have to do everything away from a piano, so you'd have to do orchestral writing, write a fugue from 2 bars or something away from a piano. But it's good training. But anyway, going off at a tangent again. Let's talk a little bit about that world of classical music and jazz. And I looked into I've got some of your CDs, and I looked at some of the stuff that I could hear online. And I know you're very classically trained in that you were doing that at Cheatham's, and obviously you've got great chops and everything. But are you recording classical music? Or are you recording improvised music in a sort of classical setting? Because I know there's some Steve Reich things, and you do various ensembles. But yeah, is it? Are you improvising? That's my question.
Oh, definitely. I mean, to be honest, it's quite difficult to say. What I really love in music and in one's career is for me is doing lots of different things. I really enjoy that challenge. I don't know whether I just get bored quickly, but I definitely couldn't do that thing of going around and playing 100 trio gigs a year or 100 solo gigs a year. Although, of course, being a musician, I'm like, well, why haven't I got 100 trio gigs a year? But that I wouldn't enjoy that at all, because what I really, really enjoy genuinely is the challenge of not problem solving, but kind of you go into, you get asked to do something, whether it's writing an orchestral piece or working with a choir for a week or doing a singer-songwriter thing, whatever it is, and you start off with nothing, and at the end of it you've got to have something, whether it's a concert, whether it's a tour, whether it's an album, and I love that challenge of trying to do the best you can and sort of adapt to the surroundings and work
Maybe
with
it's the
musicians you never
creative
worked
side
before.
of your personality. Maybe as musicians improvising, we're creative, but we also like that creativity in things that we do, which means, you know, developing it and not quite knowing how it's going to go. You know, I don't know. It's good. I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, if we weren't jumping off a cliff, I don't think that it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be as fun, would it? I mean, the kind of putting yourself out there as in putting yourself out there in terms of bearing your soul and taking that risk is I think one of the beauties of what we do. Funny enough, I was having a conversation the other day because I feel I'm an only child, but I feel so unbelievably lucky to have such a great circle of musical friends that I've met over the years, and they're not all the same circle. You know, they're all from different places, different countries, and things. And I'm sure you've found this as well. You know, you maybe spend a week with a group of people because you're working on a project, and you get incredibly close. And then you might not see them again for 4 or 5 years or something. But then when you see them again, it's just you flick the switch and you're exactly where you are, back to the same place. And I was wondering about this the other day, why that is, because there is, you know, there's other friendships in your life that if you don't maintain the friendship in the same way, they just kind of fall by the wayside. But I think it's the trust. You know, when you walk out on stage, and again, this is something I bang on to my students about, you know, when you walk out on stage, you've got an incredible responsibility to the other musicians that you're going out there, because it's a huge trust exercise in this kind of music which we're making together. And that's a really, really important, special thing. And I think that draws us all very close together. In that way, which is why, you know, we can just leave each other then for years and years and years, but when you come back, you remember that trust that you had with the other people, and you get back to that stage. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. Sorry.
It's all right. That's the interesting thing. I'm just going to veer us back, and I listened to your 2007 blues vignette, and I thought that it would be really good to play one of you playing solo piano. It's not classical. It's sort of it. I just call it improvised kind of music. It's if you like, if people play the piano, they'll instantly like enjoy it. I think I'm a piano player, so you know, it's just got all those classic nice little piano touches to it. So I'm going to play Little People from Blues Vignette, and it's from 2007. I was just going to move the conversation along and talk about composing. We've talked about your professional career, and you talked a little bit about your history of how you got into jazz. And again, on your website, this I didn't. I mean, I guessed this because I know you've written music, obviously, but didn't know that you'd written a lot of stuff. And it says you wrote music for an adaptation of Edward Albee's classic, A Delicate Balance, at the Almeida Theatre in London. And more recently, I know we both contributed to a new book called Nicky Isles and Friends, which is a book. Well, there's a couple of books. They're through written jazz styled pieces. They're not actually like improvised jazz, but in a jazz style. And there's a couple of books there. And this is actually probably why we're doing this interview, because I contacted you. I mean, we've met quite a few times, but I really loved your composition on a mission, which in a minute we can hear, because I have the CD. Yes, it was sent to me. And but I just wondered if how is writing something that you absolutely love? Is it something, do you do a lot of it? I don't know. How do you feel about composing then?
Oh, to be honest, it's the most important bit for me. I mean, I thought about this. If I had to choose between improvisation, going out and performing, or staying at home composing, I'd definitely stay at home and compose, because there's nothing. I mean, I love improvisation, obviously, and that's a lot of what we do. And in answer to your previous question, the things which should be improvised in the albums that I've done, if they're more sort of jazzy, then it's not like I've written them out. They are definitely improvised. But for me, the kind of crafting of a composition, the arc of it, is way more satisfying and engaging in the process, and something which I feel like there's so much always to learn about this, of course, and definitely in terms of writing for larger ensembles, for orchestra and things like that. And I've actually done quite a lot of writing for orchestra and those kind of things, but they're not many of them really have ever been recorded, unfortunately, just for there's been situations where the recording wasn't of a very good, the recording ended up not being a very good quality or something.
Oh, what a shame.
No, it's very frustrating.
So disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a string orchestra and piano piece for the LSO strings, which was something I was really proud of at the time. That must have been a good nearly 10 years ago as well. And I felt like that I'd sort of got forward a step in terms of my own compositional, hopefully, sort of style in terms of the form and everything, and then that never really got recorded, which was a bit of a shame. And then I guess the trouble is, it comes to a point where you're always trying to move on. Certainly with composition, I'm always trying to learn and develop and get better. So I do find it very difficult to listen back to things that I've done in the past, in a way. I mean, I was unbelievably lucky. I did there was a artist development program with the BBC, and I was the first jazz musician on that program, which again was a long time ago. And as part of that, I got the opportunity to play at the proms and write a piece for that. So I kind of wrote a jazz piano concerto, or jazz piano trio concerto, which we did at the proms, which it was probably like 2008, something like that. And that was really sort of the first large ensemble piece I'd written. And again, actually, I've never listened back to it, because I know I'd be absolutely horrified now, because I definitely have learned a huge amount since that time. And I really wish I had that opportunity now, because I feel I could do a much better job than I did back then. I mean, I did the best I could, obviously, but of course.
Maybe that opportunity will come again. But on that note, I'm just going to play On a Mission, which is, I think I'm right, it's like supposed to be grade 8 level, but it's just a lovely piece. Like, the grading is irrelevant, and you're actually playing it, so have a listen. That was On a Mission, which is a recently composed piece for the Associated Board's book Nicky Isle and Friends, Jazz Compositions. And I'm just coming towards the end of the interview with Gwilym Simcock. Gwilym's a piano player, a jazz pianist, an improviser, composer. We've been through lots and lots of different conversations. And I just want to really turn to the now. And you, I think I'm correct. You're living in Germany, is that right?
Yeah, I live between Berlin and Cheshire. I've got a cottage near to Sandbach in Cheshire, which is sort of where I'm from originally. My folks live down the road from there. Obviously, the last year has been a little bit depressing in terms of.
Are you in Germany
I
now?
am. I'm in Berlin as we speak, and it's been a tough year, as it has for everybody. The situation we have, myself and my wife, who's also from English, she's from Ipswich. She plays cello here in the Berlin Philharmonic, so she sort of very much set up with that work here, and I usually kind of flip between England because a lot of my stuff, of course, is in England. Which it was working remarkably well and smoothly and everything, and then of course the last year has turned that into being a difficult thing. So it's been very difficult for me to get back to England, which has been very sad because, of course, especially missing my folks and friends, of course, and worrying that everybody's okay. And it's quite a frustrating thing, of course, when you're sort of isolated in a different country, not able to help. I can't go out and buy some groceries for my folks or something like that, and just being able to see them, which of course, the mental side of what we're all dealing with, where it's on the surface or underneath with the lockdown, is a challenge. So yeah, if I say yes, I'm over here in Germany now, and it's a beautiful city actually. I never really had any desperate aspirations to move abroad because, of course, as musicians, we're easily sort of we're always traveling around all the time anyway. But it has been a lovely place to have ended up in.
So presumably you two are resident there now, and you've because of course on top of COVID we've got the Brexit issue. But presumably you're based in Germany. You've got are you? I mean, does it mean you can just travel Europe now and work? I mean, how does it work for a resident of Germany?
Oh, it's all deliciously complicated. I mean, Rachel, my wife, is in a great position because she's been here for nearly 15 years now. So she's massively on the case with stuff. And as soon as the Brexit thing happened, she got her dual nationality because she can do. So she's actually got a German passport as well, which is brilliant. And I, as soon as the Brexit thing happened, we applied for a residence permit. So I have that here now. And I'm just in the process of sorting everything else because there's so many different complicated things to deal with in terms of health insurance, tax, and everything that you're just trying to do the best you can and try and do it in the right way, not do anything wrong, but it's incredibly complicated.
So you're resident, obviously, in Germany, so that whole Brexit thing is one less stress. What about the fact that, I mean, there are no gigs? I mean, I think we've had ups and downs in the UK, and I know it's been like that in Germany, and now, venues in the UK have been shut for a year. Yeah, a year. And I think venues are slowly opening in May. So, I mean, I don't know when things are going to be completely back to normal. My diary is filling up in September. Before that, it's fairly, there's not a lot happening. What about you? What's it been like a year with no gigs? And have you perhaps tell us about some things that might come off? No one can say for certain, but we're hoping, yeah.
Well, and to be honest, it's very weird, and I feel embarrassed to say it, and it is a very selfish thing, but there's definitely been some upsides for us. I'm actually about to become a father in about 6 weeks. So actually, needless to say, actually being at home for the best part of the last year has actually in that respect been
You just slipped that out. I have to say congratulations. I can't just ignore that.
Thank you. So yeah, definitely spending more time at home has been good for that. And to be honest, I haven't actually stopped. I've just had a ton of different things to do with writing. I got asked back in June, I think it was last year, I got asked by the 5 specialist music schools in England and Scotland to write like a 7 or 8 minute orchestral piece, symphony orchestra, for all the kids to record. It was sort of at the beginning when everybody was doing things remotely in lockdown. So I wrote a symphony orchestra and jazz band, as it turned out, piece, which then, so I had 2 weeks to write the piece and then sent it out to the kids, and they had 2 weeks to record their part. So there was about 80 or 90 kids And then I had another 3 weeks after that to edit it together and do all the mixing, and that was something I was really, really proud of, because it was such an enjoyable thing sending it out for the kids to do, and I think they got a lot of enjoyment from being connected together at a time when everyone was very isolated. So that was one little project, and then other things. I've written a load of big band music and different bits of things like that. So I've definitely somehow been keeping busy with something or other the whole time.
So you've got a baby arriving in 6 or 7 weeks. As we know, they don't come on the day that you plan, but not usually around that time. And I mean, presumably you've got a time to spend, a certain period with your wife and the baby. But have you got like a ridiculously busy schedule in, like, say, the autumn or something, or how's it playing out for you in the future then?
Well, so much of it's up in the air. I mean, when the lockdown happened, so just over a year ago, I was actually in the middle of a tour with Pat Metheny's band, and we'd gone to Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand, and we just arrived in South America to do 3 weeks there, which I was really excited about because I've never been to South America before. So we're supposed to go all around Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and Cuba, and like Peru. And I mean, I know what it's like. You don't really, unfortunately, get to see many places that much, but just to feel like I'd been was going to be a lovely, lovely thing. And then we arrived in Argentina, and then literally we just sort of sat there for a few days while the rest of the tour collapsed, and then ended up sort of having to find complicated ways to get back home. So suffice to say, sorry, that tour possibly is going to happen at the end of the remaining bit of that tour, which we didn't get to do, is going to have supposedly happening in December. But I mean, to be honest, I'm not entirely convinced whether we'll be going to Brazil and that kind of area, places that have been having it really tough that soon. So we'll see about that.
No, I mean, yeah, that's another story. But looks like things might be happening in the autumn for you, which sounds great. I'm gonna play another track now, and like to say thank you very much, Gwilym, for your time and talking a lot about your life. And yeah, we wish you all the well with your career. But probably the most important thing at the moment is the new Simcock, or whatever the surname's going to be, that's going to arrive soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
So thank you, Gwilym, for your interview. You've been listening to Andrea Vicari, Jazz Doodles, on jazzlondonradio.com.
The JLR Interview Series.